Following the failed assassination attempt on Donald Trump yesterday, his odds to win the presidency have shot up to record highs. And in this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map if the election were held today and see what electoral gains Trump will have as a result of yesterday's unfortunate events. So looking at the betting markets right now, Trump's odds shot up to a record 69%, up 10% from where he was just a day ago. Joe Biden now has a less than 1 in 5 chance at winning the presidency again, despite being the incumbent. And so we can see here that after a period of relative stagnancy after the debate, Trump's odds surged yesterday as he continues to jeopardize Biden's re-election efforts. And so coming back to the map, we're going to start off by filling in the solid states for Donald Trump. These are states that he is absolutely guaranteed to win. There's no doubt that he is going to come out on top in virtually every single rural state, just like he did in 2016 and in 2020. And with the traditional solid Republican states filled in, the former president is at 126 electoral votes. But we're also going to include Iowa and Ohio, two states where Trump dominated in 2016 and 2020. Before these two elections, before Donald Trump came onto the scene, both of these states were blue under Obama for 8 years. They did vote for Bush in 2004, but they were very competitive until Trump made them red states 8 years ago. And in 2024, he is going to be able to win them by margins greater than 12 points. And finally, we have Texas, 40 electoral votes, the second largest state in the country by population. Donald Trump is probably going to come out on top there with a double-digit margin. For Biden, though, his list of safe states just continues to get shorter and shorter. Right now, we only have Washington, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. Basically, the most liberal states in the entire country. This will give him 112 electoral votes as he trails the former president by 79. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We will now get into the likely states. These are states that will be decided by margins between 5 and 12 percentage points, so they're still going to be relatively safe for either candidate, but they are going to be slightly more competitive. And starting off with the safe states for Biden, a lot of these are just going to be states that he won by solid margins last time. States like Oregon and Illinois, they should not be this competitive. But considering just how well Trump is doing this time around, these states are simply going to be less solid for the Democrats than they generally are. We also have the two states of New York and New Jersey. These are definitely pretty big surprises. I mean, just for context, look at the margin for Biden in 2020 in New York. 23% separated the incumbent and former president. And in New Jersey, 16%. Joe Biden actually did quite well in a state that Hillary Clinton only carried by 14 4 years prior. And so when looking at what we're seeing in these two states right now, the dynamic has just completely changed. In New York, Biden leads by 7.5 percentage points. Yes, 7 points in New York. This is very similar to the governor's election we had in 2022, where Lee Zeldin came within 10 points of defeating incumbent Kathy Hochul. And when we look at the polling over the last few months, I mean, going all the way back to October of last year, not a single poll has shown Biden ahead by more than 12 points. That's just how abysmal the Democrats are doing right now in the Empire State. In New Jersey, Biden's doing even worse. He leads by just 7%, according to the only Emerson College poll that we have. And so with the likely and solid states filled in for the incumbent president, he still trails now with 181 electoral votes. Next up, we have the likely states for Trump, and all three of them we're going to find in the Southeast. The most obvious one is, of course, Florida, 30 electoral votes. This is a state that is supposed to be the most competitive in the country. I mean, 2020, Trump did really well, and for reference, he only won the state by 3.4%. In 2016, he was able to win it by 1.2. It went to Obama in 2012. In fact, Florida was the most competitive state in that election, just like it was in 2000, and Donald Trump right now leads in Florida by 7.6%. If he wins by this margin, this will be the largest margin in Florida since 1988, when George H.W. Bush carried it by a solid 22-point margin in a 426 electoral vote landslide. That is just how momentous Trump's lead in Florida right now. If he can turn it into a victory this November just as large, he is going to totally change the dynamic here in presidential politics. Florida is no longer going to be the center of attention. And so looking at the polling, I mean, Biden hasn't led in any poll from Florida throughout the entirety of the election cycle, and there's no doubt Trump is going to win the state by at least 5 percentage points. We also have Georgia and North Carolina, two states that were pretty competitive in 2020. In fact, Georgia actually flipped for Biden. He became the first Democrat to win the state since 1992, and it was the most competitive state in the entire country. Today, though, the former president is ahead by 4%. There hasn't really been any point where Biden's come close to taking the lead here. Biden did lead in the polling in Georgia on election day. People still didn't really expect him to win it. However, he did end up on top, but that's no bearing for what's going to happen this time around. Trump is significantly more liked than he was 4 years ago, and we're seeing a very similar story in North Carolina. Trump might have won the state by just 1% last time, but he now leads by nearly 6 points, and considering the events of yesterday, we're certainly going to see a boost in support for Donald Trump. Will it last until November? We're still yet to see. However, as of right now, both North Carolina and Georgia can be classified as likely Republican. We now have 106 electoral votes worth of states left. Starting off with the lean states now for Joe Biden, we only have one, and that is going to be Colorado, 10 electoral votes. And I mean, just look at the margin here 4 years ago. Joe Biden won Colorado by 14 points. Today, he leads by just 6 points in the polling, and this is from polling conducted all the way back in December and January. The election was very different just a few months ago. I mean, go back to April, and Joe Biden at points was favored to win the election. However, basically, since the month of June began, we're slowly seeing the tide turn in favor of Trump, and now it's basically become Trump's race to lose. Now, that's the only lean state we have for Biden, but we have a pretty long list for Trump, starting off with the 2nd District of Nebraska. Trump won this region in 2016 by 2 points, lost it to Biden by 6 in 2020, but he's going to win it back this November as a result of redistricting. And so now moving on to the other states, we have Nevada and Arizona first. Now, in terms of all the lean states, these two states are probably going to be on the more solid side for Trump. We're going to see margins around 4 to 5 points here, and it's a pretty big deal considering these are two states that Biden won last time, and Nevada is a state that Republicans haven't won since 2004. So it's going to be the first victory for the GOP in the Silver State since the last Republican president was elected before Trump. And so looking at the polling in Nevada, Donald Trump leads by 5.2%. I mean, his lead has been pretty formidable against Biden, and there's really not been a single point since all the way back last year where Biden's even been remotely competitive. I mean, just look at the polling. It's essentially a sea of red. Can Biden really win a state where the polling looks like this? Probably not. We also have Arizona. The former president leads by 5.4%. I mean, again, look at the polling. It just hasn't been close. Biden and Trump have basically been moving together. Trump's always been ahead in the state for this cycle. I'm looking at the polling again. The last time Joe Biden led in a poll from the state of Arizona was all the way back in April of 2022. This was over 2 years ago. Can Biden really win here just like in Nevada? Probably not, and that is why they're both going to be lean Republican, but definitely on the safer side. I would probably say margins of around 4 to 5 points. They could inch into that likely category, but for right now, I'm going to give Biden the benefit of the doubt and only leave them in the lean category. The other 3 lean states, though, are going to be slightly more competitive. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I would probably expect the margin to be more in the range of 1 to 3%. These states were traditionally Democratic going all the way back to the 1980s, 1990s. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania formed what was called the Blue Wall, 3 states that reliably voted Democratic and helped them win numerous elections. Now, this stayed until 2016 when Trump totally destroyed that wall. Biden narrowly won the states back in 2020, but he really is not going to win them again, just considering how poorly he's doing and how much his campaign is continuing to tank. I mean, just look at Wisconsin. Trump leads by 2.6%. Now, his odds have actually gone up significantly since the debate. The debate was on June 27th. It was a tie at that point, but now Trump's lead is the largest ever. And you might think, 2 points is still pretty competitive, but the polling in Wisconsin has been known to heavily favor Democrats. Just look at what we saw in 2020. Biden was supposed to win Wisconsin by 6 points. He won it by 0.7. This was the polling last time around. Very different from what we're seeing today. While in Michigan, Trump leads by 0.6%. This is probably going to be the most competitive state out of the 3. We're seeing a pretty close election. Trump actually led by 5 points back in January. That is no longer the case, but the former president is still doing pretty well, considering that just 4 years ago, Biden was supposed to win the state by 4 points. He only won it by less than 3, and at some points in time, Biden was actually ahead by nearly 10%. And finally, in Pennsylvania, the polls here are slightly more accurate, but Trump leads by an even larger margin than the other 2, which is probably why it's more accurate. Trump leads by 5.3%. I mean, look at the debate. 2.8% was the margin on the day that it happened. Now, the margin has essentially doubled. So Donald Trump is going to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, but in the end, I would expect it to be slightly closer than what we're going to see in Nevada and Arizona. We're now left with just the tilt states that really could go either way and will be decided by margins less than 1%. The most obvious one here is, of course, Minnesota, a state that Biden actually won by 7 points in the last election. However, in 2016, Trump came within 2 points of flipping it, a state that Republicans haven't won since 1972. And when looking at the most recent polling, the most recent survey conducted by Emerson College actually shows the 2 major candidates to be in a dead heat. We also have Virginia, 13 electoral votes. This state elected a Republican governor just 1 year after Biden won it by a double-digit margin. Democrats have really fallen from grace here. The most recent polling shows Biden and Trump in a tie, the 2 most recent polls, and these are the only polls conducted at any point within the last 6 months. Biden leads by 2 points on average, but I mean, if you really take any polls that were conducted even remotely recently, you will see that there's a complete tie in Virginia, and this is definitely a state that Trump can win if the election were held today. And finally, in New Hampshire, Trump actually leads by 2 points in the most recent poll. This is actually a state where Clinton almost lost. She won it by less than half a percentage point, and it was the closest state in the entire election with the exception of Michigan. So the granite state of New Hampshire is going to be tilt Republican. Now, I am going to be generous to Biden here and give him the state of Maine as a whole. Biden won it by 9 points last time. It was pretty close in 2016, though. But in 2024, I think it can definitely go down to the wire, but I would still give a very slight advantage to Biden. Same story in New Mexico as Hispanic voters continue to shift away from the Democratic Party. And so Trump comes out on top with 340 electoral votes to Biden's 198. Now, anyone that tells you that Trump's going to win, 360, 400 electoral votes is just lying to you. This development is not going to make it so Trump will win in a landslide, but it definitely does further cement his position as the clear favorite. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like this video down below. If you enjoyed it, comment down below who you think is going to win and how many electoral votes you think Trump can win now. And make sure you subscribe for more content like this leading up to the election in November.